Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be today. Thank you for joining us. This is a Waymaker webinar today, and we've got a very special event, really, not following our traditional format, though I do have a few slides to guide us along the way. I am really pleased to be introducing once again Bill Leier and Michael Moon, who are going to be doing this exercise, really, a live consulting session to share kind of the insider experience of what it's like to go through an improbable planning and discovery process. Now, that is also something that probably doesn't exist out in SEO anywhere yet, because we're actually looking at our positioning of a process Bill describes in his book, Mastering Your Balance, which last week he shared with us some of the insights from about what balance means. We've been speaking about that a lot. The concept of balance isn't necessarily widely understood, but Bill's perspective is that it's a state of aligned readiness, basically like a tennis stance, being able to deal with whatever comes to you. I really love the analogy, and the book provides a whole bunch of really killer secrets on what it's going to take to unleash the true potential of yourself and your organization. And today we're going to be looking at an in-depth part of that process and actually experiencing it firsthand. So today, the presentation's topic is how to achieve the improbable, reach your greatest potential unburdened from the past. I believe this is about our 10th, 11th sort of webinar of this past summer, and we'll continue to keep going with this in the future. And hopefully see you at episode 100. Bill Leier is from Axis Group. He's an author, speaker, advisor. He has been a CEO of a public company and an advisor to hundreds of executives across the Fortune 500. Michael Moon is somewhat of a Silicon Valley legend. He's a business shaman, an author, a speaker, an IP catalyst. And I'm very proud and grateful to both and to the world for saying that both have been wonderful mentors for me over the past decade, decade with Bill, and I think longer with Michael. And it's just so great to be able to collaborate with them and see them come together and share these experiences and insights, and continue to not only show the depth of their character and their souls, but to also make it public in such a way that it can impact and influence others to achieve their greatest potential too. So I mentioned a little bit about what we're going through here today, which of course now jumped ahead 8 slides. There we go. We're back to the right one, or is it going to jump on me again? So about this session today. It's designed really, quite honestly, for us, because we're going to be going through this experience together, and we're going to be helping Michael achieve one of his big, hairy, audacious goals, which we'll get to here in a minute. But also any executive who's leading a transformational growth, or an individual who's seeking massive change in their life. So hopefully you will find that during the course of this webinar, you will learn some things, you will experience some things, and in fact, you will find that your self-limiting beliefs are holding you back more than you even realize. And this improbable planning and discovery process, or improbable discovery and planning process, is actually a great tool for unlocking that. This is completely unscripted and authentic. You'll see what it's like to have some empathy for perhaps not only others, but maybe some empathy and self-love for yourself. And ultimately, you're going to find that it may be a little anxious. In fact, there may be even some tension here in the the back and forth between Bill and Michael as we touch upon some really deep issues. It is disoriented, but that is the challenge in front of us. To actually achieve the greatest, we've got to climb that hill. We've got to break through, and we have to go through some struggles. In fact, as you may recall, when we were talking about pivoting to our epic life several weeks ago, one of the things that I hit upon was the fact that I didn't even realize I had been living an epic life, because the downs were very painful. But the ups and downs and the struggles, that's all part of it. And if we're going to continue to pursue that epic life, it's going to take persistence, it's going to take passion, and it's going to take a purpose. And that's part of what we're going to be uncovering today. So I've kind of already set the stage. I'm sure Bill will set it up a little bit more as we go. And without further ado, let me just jump it into the improbable. Oh, actually, yeah, let's go ahead and do that, because we can skip this. You want to skip it, Bill? No, I shouldn't.
I'd like you to go back to that slide.
Yeah. Let me go back to this. I got in such a flow. I didn't see my next screen, so apologies. You know, when Bill and Michael and I were talking about this, not scripting it, but trying to figure out, like, what is the framework? What is the workshop going to look like? One of the things that Michael came back with in really kind of contextualizing his purpose, and we'll let him do this further, of course, was the idea of resetting his life's trajectory. And when he mentioned that, I realized that we should probably come back to this slide, which is a big part of Career Disrupted, a big part of the wickedly complex times we're in, which describes the environment that we're in. And this is a general sort of individual's life path as they age, as they go through experiencing their new situations from one phase of life to another. And of course, as we see here, there's kind of the early ages when we're trying to figure out who we are, what we're going to do, you know, what brings me joy and happiness, where we're discovering this stuff up to about 30, 35 years old. Then we get into this period of investment where we've kind of chosen what it is we're going to master, and we work towards mastering it and parlaying it into more. And ultimately, as we get older in life, into our 60s or maybe even 70s today, given the fact that 60 is the new 40, as they're all saying, we start looking back a little bit, trying to harvest, but more than that, leave a legacy and make a lasting impact. And more than anything, whatever stage people are in right now, there's this general consensus that's evidenced by the hashtag and the movement called the Great Resignation, that I ain't working on Maggie's cubicle farm no more. It's time to pivot to my epic life. It's time to actually seize the opportunities from this great disruption that we're all experiencing, and to do what it was that we were meant to do. And ultimately, that's what we're going to get into here in this session today with Bill and Michael. And before I turn it over to Michael, to Bill, it would be necessary for me to explain Waymakers really briefly, because this is the core of what you're going to experience today. Waymakers stand in a possibility unburdened by the past and hold forth inspired by the mysteries of being human. That's quite a mouthful. It's quite a sentiment, and it's the heart of our work, and it's what keeps us going and keeps us showing up for these webinars to share with you, and hopefully create some further impact with you and with others that you touch. Without further ado, the improbable planning and discovery process. Bill, take it away.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. The slide you just showed is a great slide because we're going to address one fundamental myth from the start. When you talked about the age that we start with in our 60s, when we sort of think back and reflect on what we have done and what kind of legacy we'd like to leave. This is a self-limiting myth. So we can dispense with self-limiting belief number one. There is no age, chronologically speaking, of this, what you call harvesting. We know from neuroscience and from behavioral science that we can begin at any stage of our lives. It's really more a function of brain health and attitude than it is of chronology. Chronology is self-limiting if we think about it in terms of giving us precise boundaries at which we can do or begin anything. One of the differences is, based on chronology and based on our life's experiences, is yes, it's true that certain functions slow down, brain functions that are governed by speed, but they're replaced by wisdom. And wisdom is just a matter of having more data in our database of experiences that we can metaphorically see and reflect on and use to create greater results. So we've dispelled, I hope, or addressed myth number one, that you can't begin at any age, because we know that you can. And Michael, you and I have only had a brief discussion. And the only thing, the one thing that came out of it that will set the stage for today is your statement to me that you would like to reset the trajectory of your life. True?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What do you think that trajectory you would want that trajectory to look like?
Well, the question poses a little bit of a dilemma for me, in that when I did a fairly comprehensive life retrospective, one of the crushing, debilitating realizations that I had, took me about a week and a half in bed to kind of recover from this, was that the epic life that I set out to live, the goals that I set out as a young man, I had failed at completely. And yet I had accomplished some extraordinary things, things that I didn't necessarily set out to accomplish, but nonetheless were like, oh my God, I did that. So part of my internal reference system or guidance systems is that if I were to answer your question in truth and earnestness, I would say that whatever it is I say that I want to have is bullshit. It's a lie. It's perhaps a necessary illusion, but it's an approximation that is maybe directionally correct, but not correct. So how do I want to set my life? I'm not quite sure. I have a sense of that there is something more, something more epic, something a lot more. And my attempts to say, well, I want to be this or I want to be there, I'm skeptical and dubious as to the utility of that.
Good place to start. Talk about one of the things that you set out to do in one of the goals you set for yourself in your early life that you failed to achieve. Talk about one. Pick any one.
Well, I'm going to pick two because they're kind of twinned. Ones that I set out as my 20s. I want to speak 23 languages. And I speak English, and I'll never starve in Spanish-speaking places, but that's about it. When I examine the amount of work it would take to master 23 or to speak 23 languages, that would consume an entire lifetime of just dedicated language learning. And so I can see why I probably abandoned that. Another goal that I set out, it was more like a what the fuck, big, hairy, audacious goal. I want to influence $5 trillion of economic structure. Literally, I remember writing that out as a 30-year-old guy. I want to have an impact in the world that would affect $5 trillion, as I said it then, $5 trillion of economic capital, that led me into, well, what is the thing that would move that much of a needle? And I said, well, circa 1985, 83, 84, it was like, all these tech companies are around me, and here I am in Silicon Valley. They don't do diddly squat with respect to customer satisfaction. In fact, customer satisfaction is not even an afterthought. It's a fuck you for asking. So I said, Okay. Well, how about if pursue this goal of really bringing customer satisfaction, and such that it's now on the corporate balance sheet, and so it's not just a fuzzy goodwill kind of thing, but it's actually a discrete asset on the corporate balance sheet. That would be a worthwhile thing. And now that led me, curiously, into the whole digital media ecosystem, where we did a lot of work with Apple Computer, initially in the early 1990s, and then again in the mid 90s. And this led to my literally creating with my partners a thing called digital asset management and digital brands. And digital asset management was going to be the accounting system, and brands were going to be the thing that would be the proxy on the brand value, brand equity would be the thing on the balance sheet that would tie back to, again, the accounting system of digital asset management. So, so
What derailed it?
well, I'm not sure it was. I'm not sure. Um, I'm not
Okay,
sure.
I mean, what made it fall short of $5 trillion?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that it did. Uh, 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 yeah, I'm not sure it did. Because however, this is not a matter of taking credit. It's a matter of, well, I launched a dream. I stood by it. I nurtured it. And then, like a child that grew up and went off into the world, it has a life of its own now. So, did it derail? Perhaps the only derailment was I didn't economically benefit to anywhere.
Okay, yeah, you were not a participant.
Well, I was, but I was
Well,
kind of sideshow monkey, as opposed to the elephant in the three-ring
what
circus.
what I mean by participant is you were not a formidable force in both, not only from acknowledgement and credit and self-satisfaction, but you didn't make a whole hell of a lot of money from it.
Well, I made some money, but you're right. I didn't make
Five
relative.
trillion, I mean, 1% of 5 trillion would have put you in a pretty good place, right?
It sure would.
Okay, so let's stay with that,
All right.
because we're talking today. I mean, I could go off on what made you choose 23 languages, but but that's a whole different discussion that is somewhat distractive.
Well,
Today
no,
I'd
it's
like,
not. No, it's not. In that, from a very early age, I intended to have an international, global impact of some sort.
okay,
That was the
all right,
23 languages.
okay, so that was symbolic of that. Okay, that would be a symbol of you
Yeah.
being able, or an asset, a requirement for you to do
Uh-huh.
that.
Yep.
Okay, but so everybody who's watching and listening, so watch what's going on with Michael, or my interpretation of it. He started out by saying, he talked about failures, and I asked him to describe one of the failures, and he said his failure to achieve this economic impact of $5 trillion. And then he reverted during our conversation to, well, maybe I didn't fail. It was not, now he was defending his role in creating the $5 trillion. But the real gap here is, and maybe you did, Michael, and maybe you did it more than you think you did. And maybe you were every bit as successful from an influence standpoint as you had envisioned yourself, but you weren't in the room when the big money was passed out.
Yeah.
So this is what our egos do. First, they bring us down, then they try to lift us up, then they try to strengthen our self-image. Then in a unhealthy state, then they try to control what our thought processes are. So going back to the what would it take, the strength of the what would it take question came out of the neuroscientific study of clinical depression and how the ego takes over and prevents any new thoughts from coming in. So phrasing this in the context of what would it take is really asking you and everybody else who's involved to move that ego, those thoughts out of the way, leaving room only for your imagination. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, you didn't achieve your $5 trillion goal in that you were not a sufficiently engaged or connected participant in the fruits of the financial fruits of those labors. And we can start from there and say, so what would it take for you to redefine perhaps, or refine, or refocus a trajectory that allowed you to not only do what you set out to do, but to do it in a way that monetizes it for your benefit as well. I mean, what the hell? You're helping to create it. Why shouldn't you help prosper from it?
So the reframe. What's the question again?
What would it take
Uh-huh.
to reset your trajectory
Got it.
in a way that allows you to participate in the financial fruits of your labors?
Well, so with respect to impacting, influencing, adding something to $5 trillion of economic impact, been there, done that. I'm just that was a necessary illusion, a quixotic aspiration that led me in a particular direction that produced these extraordinary things that showed up in my life. I no longer care about that.
What do you care about?
Right. Well, in my life retrospective, I came to realize two or three really fundamental things. One, most of my, actually, I would say all of my career successes, from writing the book to traveling around the world a couple times, actually not traveling around the world 50 times all told, leading hundreds and hundreds of keynotes, on and on and on. It wasn't what I did per se. It was the collaboration and what showed up in the collaborations. I found that whatever I framed as my accomplishments were gratifying but empty and not particularly meaningful.
Okay, so let me stop. Pardon me for interrupting, but
Please.
Notice that Michael is keeping the conversation of meaningfulness focused on his past. And what I'm asking you to do is let's talk about tomorrow.
Well, that's right. And
Don't frame it, just go there.
Okay. The trajectory, the direction, start that way, is that I want to do things that I find intrinsically deep down meaningful. Not just meaningful to me, aha, I got the joke, you didn't, but meaningful in a way that is a shared experience. So,
what might be an example of that?
Where, as a function of what I might say or publish or do, a group of people go, oh, all is well. Oh, I have an opportunity that I didn't know that I had before. Oh.
Okay, stop right there. You want to create opportunities.
Create slash reveal. Sure.
Okay. So let's mentally put that on the list of possibilities.
Okay.
Doing something that creates and reveals opportunities.
That's right.
Opportunities in any particular sphere.
Well, the ones that I'm most particularly concerned about today are in the sphere of individuals and small teams.
Individuals and, pardon?
Small teams.
Small teams. Doing what?
Whatever it is that is meaningful for them. So it seems to me, let me come back. It seems to me that a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people, like maybe 95% of the people, maybe more, are doing things in the world to survive, to get by, to pay the bills, to do what they're supposed to do, to be a good girl, to be a good boy, blah, blah, blah. They're doing a lot of stuff in the world that is not particularly meaningful to them. And they are paying a tremendous price emotionally, intellectually, psychically, spiritually for doing what I call debt bond slavery and not really living true to who they are or really bringing their genius, their gifts to the world.
Okay, so you're talking about, as I interpret it, you're talking about opportunities and realizations that can bring about fulfillment.
Sure.
So let's focus on fulfillment.
Okay.
And you want to turn that into an activity or a direction or a business model, if you will, that can help people see, create, and activate those things.
That's right. And so my thinking so far has been is to have a economic activity. I won't call it a career because I think that diminishes it. But an economic activity of a successful international public speaker, just public speaking, and under the rubric of what I might call a tribal or business shaman story.
Okay, but public speaking becomes a strategy, right?
Sure.
And that strategy is designed to help you achieve that goal of creating opportunities and realizations
That's
for
right.
individuals and small teams that they can actively pursue to make a huge difference in their lives and the lives of everybody they touch.
Yeah.
You are the force multiplier. You are the catalyst.
Yeah.
Okay. How does that sound? How does that feel?
Good. And
Worthy of your energy?
yes.
So, I mean, because you're a visionary thinker. So, to me, I've met and worked with a few visionary thinkers, and their great asset is their ability to just view the universe metaphorically. And the problem is none of them have an off switch.
Right. As my wife occasionally reminds me every day.
You just don't have an off switch. So focus is a challenge.
Yeah.
So, all right, so there's a couple things here. First, you need some kind of help, assistance to keep this vision, if you will, this emerging vision focused so that you don't go off the rails periodically or continuously because you've had another really good idea, but it's just not appropriate for what you're doing.
Right.
And you need resources because what you're describing is not a one-man show. So let's talk about the kind of resources you think you might need and can bring to you. What would it take to turn you into a world-renowned, highly in demand speaker?
Well, first, it starts with, Steve Martin's great frame.
Yeah.
Be so good they can't ignore you. So get good.
Okay, great. Great. That's great, because it begs this really important question for anybody who's doing this kind of exercise. If the perfect opportunity presented itself tomorrow, would you be the perfect candidate?
By definition, no, I wouldn't be.
Not yet. The answer is not, the right answer is not yet.
Yeah, yeah,
Because if you're ready, it means you're underachieving.
yeah.
So now the question becomes, so what are the steps to making you so good they can't ignore you, in Steve Martin's words? So let's talk about that for a minute.
I it's a great question, and it brings forward. Um, uh, Maybe it's a self-limiting belief, but it brings forward a paradox or a dilemma. Uh, I lived most of my life believing that ideas had value, had impact, and they were fungible, and the more that I've learned over the course of life is that, well, ideas are great catalysts. The value is in terms of how do people feel as they encounter and incorporate or assimilate those ideas as experiences, as beliefs, as action. And so I don't know.
Okay, let me be bold and offer this.
Sure.
Reflection is preventing you from focusing on what you have to do going forward.
I'll stipulate that. Sure.
Okay, so you've got a way within your own consciousness to stop yourself when you find yourself reflecting as a prerequisite for thinking about the future. Just think about the future. Clean sheet of paper, Michael. What do you need? What resources do you have to go out and get to help you achieve this new trajectory?
Well, I kind of put those in three areas. Uh, uh, One, I'll put it, immediately at hand. I need, I have, and I need to continue to build daily habits, regular habits for being well, for being focused, and for being productive in terms of, day in, day out. I've got a routine, I work in the routine, and have systems and habits that support, enable my moving forward. So that's
Okay, great. Let's talk about the content of your message. What
right.
are the elements of content that you need to build in a way that you can present in such a compelling way that you cannot be ignored? You're talking about content that moves mountains, Michael.
Yeah. So I'm kind of a little bit in that as a function of working a particular part of the farm that I've worked, content is a bad word. Content is crap. Content is shit. Content is red, green, and blue dots that have been separated from imagination and an author. So content is a bad word. It's a bad distinction, and it speaks to profound stupidity and ignorance of people who use it. My opinion.
Okay, so that's one thing, that's one self-limiting belief you need to get rid of.
Well, maybe. So then what? So
Maybe it's like being a little pregnant, Michael.
well, so I disagree then. No.
Okay, great, great.
Content is
Give me
part.
an, give me another word for
The
content.
mindset of content is part of the stupidity that keeps people locked in their jails.
But Michael, content is what great stories are about.
No, great stories are great stories.
Because they have great content.
No, because they have people that are faithfully able to express those stories across various media, and in the process create digital assets and frameworks that evoke deep emotional recognition of, oh, that's right, I forgot.
Okay,
Content is an abstraction. It's something that the beer seller in the bleachers talks about. On the field of play, there's no content. There's stories, there's emotion, there's connection, there's authenticity, there's showing up.
and those things are embedded in content.
No, they're not. Content is an after the fact. It's the fish wrap.
Michael, this is hurdle number one.
Okay.
We've just discovered a major, major roadblock.
Okay.
What would it take for you to adapt a new meaning, appreciation, and focus on content?
Well,
You don't have to answer that right now. You can't.
right.
But that's your number one challenge. You have got to see content in a new frame.
Okay.
So Michael, Michael,
I'm just saying.
Michael.
I've spent 35 years.
Michael,
I spent 35 years attacking the very concept of content.
I know, I get it. I get it. So Michael, here's a suggestion.
Okay.
How do you get connected to and have deep discussions with some brilliant fiction authors and screenwriters? Because they will help you completely change your view of the value and construct of content.
Again, I disagree. So when I listen deeply, and so for example, like On Story at you see on public television, it's part of the Austin Film Society, and I listen deeply to the writers and directors and producers of some of our great entertainments, movies, television shows, and series, and so on. They don't live in content. It's what the suits take.
Oh, the suits are a whole different. Don't go there. Don't go to the suits. That's a whole different discussion.
Stephen King or John Grisham, they don't use the C word. They just don't. It's not part of their creative process.
There's two things that they use to develop compelling stories.
Yeah.
The strength and the relatability of their characters,
Sure.
and the area in which those characters live and express that,
Sure.
and that's called content.
No, it's not. It's called imagination.
Imagination creates content. It's one of the things that you use to create
like
content.
human beings produce feces. That's true.
When you read a story, Michael, you're reading a body of content.
No, I am participating in a co-created a realm of imagination, and to the extent that I ascribe to script, to the extent that I bring the fecal matter of content into that story, I pervert it. When I read a great work of fiction, I am transported into this co-created realm of imagination.
Yeah, that's what great content does. It makes
If I may jump in, because I've had this discussion with Michael over the course of many years. Technically, he is correct. Practically in the world, not. So perhaps this is a accurate truth that becomes a self-limiting belief in the course of resetting the trajectory. So, but for the sake of time, I'm interjecting here now to suggest, Bill, that you move forward onto the next topic, because I understand Michael's intransigence with this issue, because he's right. But also to this point, Michael brings about the opportunity to reconsider its position as a symbol, and you being right and others not understanding through this word. And I would just suggest that we move forward to the next topic.
Let me just, before we do that, if
Please,
it's
Stephen.
okay. We're streaming what's going on now on Facebook, as I understand it.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And some people might call that content.
And they would be stupid and disabling themselves.
But nevertheless, in the conventional meaning of that term, that could be something that could break this debate, because whatever you want to call it,
Everyone relax one at a time.
let's find a different word for it. But it's something that's going on on Facebook. And that's, I think, what Bill is alluding to.
I agree. And this is at the crux, the very essence of what I want to bring into the world.
Right.
Exactly.
I want to bring into the world.
You have to bring it. Okay. So here, rule number one, Michael, rule number one in marketing is you have to meet your customers where they are, not where you are.
Sure.
I have a quick suggestion. It just seems to me that what Bill is asking of Michael and will be asking of others and has asked of many people is the what if game. So you just sit down and say, I have a firm belief. What if, for the moment, I let go of that and do as Bill suggests and explore this from a different mindset and a different way and get different people to work with me on it? What can happen? It would seem as though the worst thing that can happen is that you come up with even more concrete realization for your belief structure and understand whether it is limiting or not, whether or not you do have to say, okay, I hold this to be true to me deep inside, but maybe it is a way that I can relate to other people, that I can get beyond a point that I've gone to. And the best thing that can happen is for you to actually have an epiphany of sorts.
Okay.
So that's all
I'm absolutely open to that.
Yeah,
Okay. But here's the point. Here's a really important point that everybody should understand and take away. First of all, the process that Michael, the apparent roadblock, the obvious roadblock that Michael and I have hit right now is very, very normal. Not the same roadblock, but a really, really deeply held belief is often at the base of change. More often than not.
Yeah.
And we, Michael, you and I have come upon that fairly quickly in the process. What Michael and I are going through, and we had no idea where this was going to go, how far it was going to go. All we said was it's going to be real. And by God, it's real. Now, oftentimes when I work with clients on this sort of thing, it can be a day or two or three before we really get to the core of a deeply held, proven in your mind, experientially demonstrated throughout your life that you're right, and then you become judgmental about anything that challenges it. And that's normal. So we are, I'm happy to this is not, to me, getting stuck in the weeds. This is not preventing progress. This is the core of unpacking all this so we can make real progress. Because we can move on to Chris's point for the flow and the entertainment value of this webinar.
But that would be producing content.
Pardon me?
That would be producing content.
Score one for Michael. All right. But I'm starting to
Well,
get a
let's go with
picture,
this.
Michael.
Hey, look,
Michael, I'm starting to get a picture of what you're finding fault with in this concept of content.
Mhm.
But there's more to it. And what we're going to do is in future sessions, whether they're public or not, we're going to get to that, because it's keeping you from it's going to keep you from achieving what you set out to achieve.
I get it. So let's, rather than talk about it, let's just do this.
Well, JS brings up one of the next steps in the process, and it goes something like this. With respect to content, what if everything you have learned and come to believe about content is wrong? And what if everything you think is wrong about it is right? That's the what if question.
Okay.
And that's but we're not going to.
So part of my part of the basis of my freedom is the ability to step into paradoxical situations and experience them as true. So yes, I get that. So let me just restate it. So everything that I know and believe about content is wrong. And everything, I can't remember the second part of it.
Everything you think is wrong about content is right.
Got it. Okay, perfect. That's a great double bind. Stipulate.
That's what I'd like you to play. Now
we're there now, so let's play.
Okay, so let's construct from that new hypothetical truth a new definition for content.
Sure.
Your thoughts?
Well, if I were striving for linguistic concision, I would.
Let's say you're okay. Let's put it in context. You're striving to deliver as a speaker something that is so valuable that you cannot be ignored. What would it look like? What would it sound like? What feelings and emotions would it arouse?
Well, the feeling, let me work backwards. The feelings that it would arouse would be a sudden, followed by relief and tears of joy. It's like, I've always known that to be true. I was told that it wasn't. I hoped that it was, but somehow the dam has bust, and all of a sudden it's like, oh. And in that experience is not only an experience of freedom, new choices, power, ability to accomplish things, and oh my God, that is the key for me to bring my meaning into the world in a way that makes a difference. So it'd be recognition, it would be relief, it would be tears of recognition. That's the experience.
Here's what I would like you to do. Write that down, not on a whiteboard, but in your notes. Write that down, because that now becomes the foundation upon which you are going to build your speaking platform.
Yeah, perfect. So,
and forget the word content.
Yeah, well,
just work on the platform.
Yeah.
Work on that. Start working on that speech, those talks,
Sure.
because you cannot be ignored. Now, that doesn't put you on center stage, but it does put you, when you present it to the right influencers and strategic partners,
Yep.
it will bring to you the resources that you need to become that persona.
Perfect. Yep. So, but I do want to answer your question. So I would replace, supersede content with something that's better. And I would call it a transmediated artifact, because it's an artifact, it's a thing, it's transmediated, but it means that there was somebody who consciously took this idea, experience, and then put it into a very specific form, format, medium to achieve that intent.
Okay. You can't, if you're going to impact individuals and small teams,
Right.
you can't have a title that only Mensa members can understand.
No, I understand, but that's why I framed it as, in terms of linguistic concision, it's a transmediated artifact. So now the question is, how do we put that into popular kind of?
Yeah, it's called content, but never mind that.
No, it's not.
That was, I'm sorry, I apologize.
It's a shareable experience.
Okay, but Michael, if you write down what you just said, if you capture the essence of what you just said, and use that as the foundational base from which to build a talk or a series of talks.
Sure.
Now you are developing a product.
Got it.
You need a product.
Sure.
That's what people buy, products.
Uh-huh.
When you have that product, you will attract the resources that you need to get it out into the world.
Sure.
We now have the fundamental elements of what it will take to put the plan in action.
So
we also, just because you were able to make that shift, kudos to you, because you were able to make that shift and just hear the message. That's what it takes. What we have done in the space of an hour, I can tell you from experience, normally takes a week. Kudos.
Well, while it may be kudos for me today relative to, I would like, I look for, I stand in the dream where what just occurred in half an hour is a commonplace fixture of what it means to be human in the world.
Yeah.
So so that's
so here's, find a group of people who will not tell you what you want to hear. They will tell you what you need to hear.
Okay.
And they will become your editors.
Well, I mean, that was, I kind of chuckle a little bit, but Chris, if you turn your video on, that is the intent of creating Waymakers.
Okay, but you forget Waymakers for a moment.
But I'm just saying that
we're talking about Michael's career,
sure,
Michael's trajectory, Michael's stepping into a new paradigm that says there's no age limit on when new beginnings can occur.
Sure.
Stay there. Don't leave that space.
Okay.
Get your advisory group together. They will be people who understand how compelling stories work.
Yeah.
Some of them might be on this webinar. Some will not. Some new ones you need to bring in. Maybe people you don't know.
Yeah. Cool.
You put this into the context of a plan. Set some guidelines, set some goals for who you're going to meet, how you're going to bring them into the fold,
Mhm.
the body of your message, start to work on that. You're going to write a lot of really crappy first and 10th drafts, which is normal in the writing process, as you know. I know it. Anybody who's written a book knows it. Get to work, Michael. You got the pieces.
Cool.
You.
Yay. I get it. Yeah. Thank you, Bill. And thank you for your dogged persistence in dealing with my
Confirmation bias.
well, I was going to say sense-making bias. That's right.
Or Michigas, as the case might be. Yes. Bill, one of the things that I really appreciate about your work is and both of you actually, is your combination of the humanity of the soul and also of kind of the neuroscience, the science and the more practical academic side as well, even. What does the neuroscience show us about that sort of resistance?
Well, Michael's confirmation bias is extremely strong in certain areas. Almost unshakable. Certainly unshakable if he tries to do this on his own. Anybody who tries this sort of thing as a solo journey, I got this. I'm the master of my own destiny. I can do this on my own. I don't need anybody's help. You cannot do this journey solo. Nobody can, if it's going to be done right. And that's because you will only hear the echo of your own biases at some point in the process, and they will keep you stuck.
Only you can do it, but you can't do it alone.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Well said. Well
I have
said.
a question for Michael then with regards to that specifically. And it seems as though my experiences of being with this group now for a number of weeks, that it's a really nice, safe place that we find we can do a lot of self-realization and realization through the efforts of others. My question for you, Michael, though, is realistically, how well do you let other people in?
I
I
don't.
know you hear what they do,
I
but
don't.
yeah, I didn't think you do, because we're kindred spirits that way. I listen to what people say. I know what I should be doing, but I don't necessarily do it or put these things into practice.
Let me put it this. Let me restate that. My reflex with respect to letting other people in is fuck no. Just it takes conscious, deliberate, persistent intent for me to open. And part of that is my daily practice of part of my journaling and so on is may it be that I expand my capacity, willingness, and desire to receive the presence of others as a gift with gratitude. So I know that whatever it is I want to accomplish or see realized in the world will be a function of not just letting people in, but letting people into my private sandbox and co-create.
Yeah.
So Bill, then this might be too much fodder for right now, and certainly another session. But is there a quick tip or tips that you might have to Michael as he moves forward? Because this seems like it's a real solid stumbling block that needs to be dealt with before he can get much further.
Well, yeah, he's made a start. So if Michael, JS and everybody, if Michael was an actual client, this were an actual a real life consulting experience.
Well, no, it is a real life consulting experience.
Well, I
think,
define real.
I think Michael's taking it serious as heck. Yeah.
Well, it is serious. My pardon me, but my definition of a real experience is one that I'm getting paid for. But anyway,
Right.
I'll put $1 in the mail today. Okay, so then you have client attorney privilege.
but that's just my bias. Anyway,
Bill, I'll PayPal you $1 right now. It'll be there before you get out.
way to go. But if this were that kind of experience, what we would be doing now is capturing Michael's thoughts, putting it into the foundation of a plan, talking about all the resources he would need to surround himself with, developing a written strategic plan, if you will, for going about doing just those things. And we would establish milestones and timelines and resources required and commitments. And Michael would have to be willing to be held measurably accountable for making and keeping commitments. That means not allowing distractions to come into play, being able to separate the road from all the stuff that's going on in the mind of every visionary. There aren't that many of them around, but they all suffer from that common condition of never having an off switch and seeing all the metaphors at once. Chris, you've experienced that once or twice in your life,
A little bit.
starting from birth, and that's what we would be doing, JS and Michael and everybody. We would have the elements of a plan. Now it would get enlarged and enriched and modified as we go along, but we now have a way to begin. And in a real life situation, we would begin.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't come back and circle around to this point that Michael made earlier. Michael's been on this journey of discovery and experimentation, where we've been testing hypotheses, where we've gotten this group together. To what we're doing here today is a part of that plan and journey. It's much, we do have a plan, actually. We've been handling it in a much more emergent, ad hoc way to invite others into the co-creation. So there's a bit more there. But I will also point out, Michael, as much as I love you, and as we've talked about this, and we've had these discussions over the course of several years, his precision is his gift. And like many of us, our greatest gifts are sometimes the double-edged sword, and they prevent us from achieving all that we possibly could because it doesn't allow for connection with others. And perhaps this word and this particular conversation is more representative of a broader sort of pattern that I know Michael has been exploring, and that he has made tremendous progress in personally in overcoming a lot of his constraining beliefs, but a lot of his right beliefs that just didn't work with other people. And that becomes a part of it. And, you know, one of the things Michael has turned us on to in the course of our dialogue over the last several months, and for me, longer than that, is this understanding of I am and it is, how we exist within the world and how that interplay happens. And Michael, what I would suggest back to you in watching this unfold and having thought about this a lot in my conversations with you personally and not pushing back as hard as Bill is that this is, you know, just that other point of consideration. And what I see here as well, and Bill, I want to ask you a question on this to get to closure around this so we can start wrapping up. This sort of, you know, I know this to be true, it is true, meeting the reality of a world in which they say, yeah, but I don't understand you, or, you know, it's too complicated or too complex, or we're just not speaking the same language or on the same vibe. I think a lot of people out there looking at this idea of resetting their life's trajectory are going to be facing that same sort of challenge. So is there something, again, more in the world of neuroscience about teaching old dogs new tricks?
Well, yes, yeah. You know, let me. It's an interesting with teaching new dogs, old dogs, new tricks. Is kind of interesting because my definition of an old dog is a dog of any age that is not willing to learn any new tricks, and a puppy is a dog of any age that is willing to learn new tricks. So your willingness to open up. Now, the other thing that Michael and I would get into later on, maybe sooner rather than later, is one of the keys in this whole scheme of being relatable is empathy. Michael, one of your goals, one of your objectives would be to become more empathetic, so you don't come across as someone who is or is attempting to establish himself as the smartest guy in the room. So you look at some of the great thought leaders in a variety of areas, the Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela. They were extraordinary and relatable. You could walk up and have a one-on-one conversation. If they were addressing a crowd of 10,000 people and they happened to look in your direction, you had the feeling that they were talking just to you. That's more than message. That's a feeling of, I understand you on your terms without judging you. And that is both neuroscience and behavioral science in action. The empathy part is behavioral. Where it resonates in the brain is neural. You want to connect with people's limbic brains. You cannot do what you're setting out to do by connecting only with the cerebral cortex. It won't work. You have to connect to the amygdala.
Bill, I had a thought. It just occurred to me that one of the things that Michael, and I'm curious to see your thoughts on this, that Michael can do immediately is to work on practicing more mindfulness, being in the moment.
Oh yeah, because his mind is, he's able to see things. I mean, it's not the same as synesthesia, but it is kind of a synesthesia effect in that Michael, you look at a pair of sunglasses and Michael's looking at the science of how sunglasses came into being and what could be done to improve them and why they don't work, why there's a better alternative. And his mind just goes there. Mine doesn't, because I don't have that capability.
Let me say a few remarks. First of all, I just want to acknowledge this somewhat weird vertigo sensation of being in a conversation about me. Yeah, just being kind of a spectator, right? Or a silent participant anyway.
Perfect.
So I'm just trying to say, oh, this is a little weird. It's fun, weird. Have I heard anything new? No. To put this in context, about 20 years ago, 19 years ago maybe, for my New Year's resolution, I had concluded that, I was smart as what, really smart. What I really lacked was empathy. So I started looking around for, well, what could I do to build empathy? Now, fast forward, I meditate twice a day. I do my gratitude journals. I do mindfulness, other sorts of mindfulness, character strength spotting. So I do things every day to stretch my empathy muscles. Doing these webinars has been a conscious, deliberate intent on my part to connect with others in a meaningful and more empathic way. So nonetheless, 19 years ago, I said, okay, well, I really want to, now that I've identified what the issue is, I really, really want to speed it up. So I says, okay, this year's resolution is I want to become 10 times more empathic this year. Okay. And 6 weeks later, I'm in Levi, Finland. So that's 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle at a customer event that I'm keynoting for Nokia. And I step off a curb, I fall back, and I break both my arms. I go into shock. They put me in an ambulance. An hour and a half later, they take me to a place called Rovaniemi, where I'm now, I'm heavily sedated. I'm in a 3-bed hospital room, recuperating from a really serious break of my ulna and radial distal radius over here, and for a week, it turns out the number 2 most popular TV show that's in Finland is the English language version of The Bold and the Beautiful. So every day I'm watching The Bold and the Beautiful, and I come back and I get a staph infection, and back to the ICU, near-death experience. Literally saw death at my doorstep. Looked a little bit like John Belushi in A Killer Bee. That was my imagination, but I was very close. You've got work to do. So I'm just saying. And what happened over this next 2 or 3 months is I couldn't do anything. I couldn't write. I couldn't type because of the traction, and I forced myself, as a function of essentially Percocet and Vicodin, I forced myself into a basically shut down my neocortex. And so I had the experience of so I would watch TV and I'd get weepy and all that kind of stuff. So, long story, I know that I'm working, I know that becoming more empathic is central, core, pivotal to my being effective. And I'm doing a lot of stuff already on a daily basis to do that. So the question then is, knowing that is required but insufficient. Doing these things that I'm doing, I've made great, check with my wife, I've made great progress. What else, what else can I do here?
Oh,
So,
You can replace your thoughts by accessing your feelings.
but
I
going
was
back to
gonna
what
say
you were
something
saying,
similar.
Bill, I'm sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just to say, opening your heart means that you have to surrender to somebody.
So again, getting back to a fundamental part of Bill's training here, 19 years ago, Michael, it doesn't sound as though you had somebody on this journey with you.
Oh, I did. I had my wife.
Did you?
And if she were to step in here, she would say, yes, it's been quite a journey. And I would tell you that it's been a journey of how I've been transformed by her love of me.
Okay.
Really clear.
And maybe you need other people, again, like Bill was saying, find people who can be editors, maybe people who don't really have a dog in the fight. I think that's probably more important. I don't turn to my wife for important advice. That 36 years has taught me never ends well. So
Professional advice, you mean?
yeah, otherwise it's just simple. Whatever you want, dear, is basically all I ever say to her, really. That's our communication. But I've gotten some really good advice from homeless people because they just really don't care. They'll be brutally honest.
We're starting to run out of time. So Bill, I'm going to get to that portion of getting back to sharing my screen and starting to wrap us up. We've got a couple of items that we still want to hit on here. We've spent quite a bit on the neuroscience, so I feel really comfortable with where we've gotten to from there in terms of going into the process, and also some of the meta sharing of the process itself, and again, the underlying sort of mechanizations. So this is the beginning of the improbable planning and discovery process. We've actually addressed it now for an individual leader, really at a point of inception. This could also happen for startups to explore this with a startup founder or team. But what I would encourage you to do is to go out and pick up a copy of Mastering Your Balance, Bill's book. It's not referenced as the improbable planning and discovery process inside of the book. It's broadly talked about through the various experiences that Bill had from when he was a college student with his professor asking that question on a quiz, all the way through his work with that big database company down in Redwood City and many other very large public corporations where it has created exponential growth. So Bill, you had a little bit that you wanted to ask our listeners, particularly those who have made it this far, or viewers, to actually consider.
Yep.
And so why don't you go ahead and talk about what you'd like everyone to undertake as a little bit of homework assignment.
I would like everybody to engage, to do yourself a great service and take on this "what would it take" challenge for your organization. The first one is for your organization. Now we know, and neuroscience and behavioral science are producing results every day that talk to the emerging scientific fact that after 40 hours a week, our productivity severely suffers. And it impacts not only the quality of the work we're doing, but a lot of the side effects in our lives that create a quality of life or distract from it, deter it. So here's the question. What would it take for your organization to significantly improve your productivity while having everyone work no more than 40 hours a week? That is a question that I strongly encourage everybody to take on. And I'd be very, very interested in hearing the results of that process. The second
I'm just interested in hearing what people think it will take, because I know several organizations who have tried to do this. I have friends of mine where the company has moved from 5 days a week to only 4 days a week, trying to encourage that. And I still see the people within those companies working 60 plus hours a week.
Right. Talk to any startup and you'll be laughed out of the room. But take it on. And I want to hear, I don't expect any solutions, but I really want to hear the issues that are raised, the objections, the barriers.
Yes.
The second one is personal, equally brain healthy. What would it take for you to get 8 hours of sleep every night? What would it take? Now, we know that the conscious mind requires cleansing. It's the same as brushing your teeth. Chris and I had a discussion, and Chris talked about it in terms of, yes, your conscious mind needs recovery time. Well, it does, but it also needs cleansing every night, and it takes 8 hours to cleanse it. You get rid of the chemical buildup in the various brain centers. You get rid of a lot of toxicity. It's the same, again, it's the same for your brain as brushing your teeth and flossing. You don't do it, eventually it's going to lead to tooth decay, gum disease, and it doesn't matter what you eat or how you look, your teeth are going to rot and your gums are going to get infected. Your brain is slowly going to, it's like clogging the pipes in a water system. Eventually, water won't flow. So what would it take? What would it take for you to get 8 hours of sleep every night? And again, I'm really interested in the barriers and challenges that it produces for people.
If I may just interject one thing here, which is that the answer of what would it take is simply scheduling it and adhering to that schedule. The challenge of what would it take is getting through our life and our habits and our current expectations and designs of our life and the way we live it to let go of those to embrace this new way of thinking. So my question to you, Bill, if looking at the underlying thing, if we come to what would it take being, I just need to schedule it to go to bed before 10 and get up at 6 or later, what would it take perhaps for me to change my existing behaviors to enable me to sleep 8 hours every night?
Yeah, I mean, scheduling will get you to the point where you can lie in bed for 8 hours. How much of that time you're sleeping is a whole different question.
Yep.
So, we know that meditation is a great tool. We know that diaphragmatic breathing is a great tool. What else? Well, diet is a great tool. How long before you go to bed how much time elapses between the time you eat and the time you go to bed? If it's more than 4 hours, if it's less than 4 hours, you're going to have a problem. Depending on what you eat, that's also going to be a problem. So this talks to a whole different lifestyle, Chris.
Yes. Well, then we get into the dopamine bursts from being on our cell phones as we go to sleep and learning not to take our phones into bed with us.
Blue light in the room, period, is a distraction. That means don't fall. Pardon?
I worked with a company right shortly before COVID took in, who set the question, what can we do as a company for our workers to intercede in their life and help them get more sleep? And I have to find out if it's still covered by the NDA, and then I could tell you all about the company and everything. But some of it was really interesting. They interceded. They first off said, let us take everybody that works for us and have them do a sleep study and determine whether or not they have sleep apnea or anything else that could physically be determined easily that could prevent them. And they actually found within their workforce, this is just one part of it, I'll stop after this, but they actually found there were 17% of the workers had some form of sleep apnea that required them to be on a CPAP or BiPAP machine in order to get better sleep. That's considerable, 17% that were undiagnosed as having sleep apnea or form of sleep apnea.
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge. Well, I appreciate the conversation. And as I mentioned, I think we delivered on our promise. It may make you anxious. It may make you feel a little good. You're going to have some empathy for it. You're going to have an understanding of some of the challenges that come up. This is real. This is, part of an ongoing process. But as Michael mentioned, he made his realization a long time ago. And here we are, almost 2 decades later, and it's still another inception point, another chance to go further into that process and to figure out, to the earlier questions, not just what would it take to reach 1 billion people around the world, but what would it take to really create an impact on the world through this work and fairly participate in the gain share of the value created through that work. I don't think that it is, well, let me say it this way. Most of my life, I have ignored the second part of it with the understanding that, hey, one day one of these ideas is going to hit and I'll be okay. And that's not true. That's like my other understanding that this Waymakers process has unfurled for me personally, which is to identify that my whole life I was trying to go with the flow. And what I really need to do, and what I suggest you might need to do if you feel similarly, is to go after the flow, to do the things that it takes to get you into the state of being where you can contribute your best self to the world. And in so doing, get the rewards and the benefits of that contribution in return. So this is a combination of what we do. One of the things that all of us share in common, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn for Don, Stephen, JS, or Michael or Bill, because we've talked about it before, is the knowing that the world and how it works can be better than it is today, that we can improve a lot of things, that we know much more than we've actually put into action, And the process that we've gone into today is one of the many, perhaps, that we could put to your organization or to your own personal professional goals to help you transcend that and achieve that level of contribution and that level of impact. We want to change the way organizations are done. Well, you know, why aren't we just selling organizational change? Well, we're doing a bit of that too, and we do that work. We certainly have a variety of tools over decades and decades of experience working with Fortune 100 and 500 executives and organizations and leading transformation efforts or digital transformation efforts or just change management, as it used to be called. And what it comes down to, though, is that it's the individuals leading those transformation efforts where it all starts. So what we're doing here with Waymakers is we're actually focusing on those individuals who need to transform their own life journey to live an epic life, to understand their role and their ability to contribute their unique gift and participate in the gain share, so that that may become a more standard operating model across the whole of the organization. And that these Waymakers within these organizations are the ones leading the way to enable more people to live an epic life, to be able to give and live their gift with the world, to be able to enjoy and share in the gain share that they create through their contributions. And so if you're interested in learning more, we'd love to talk to you. Bill has kindly offered to do a 1-hour no-cost initial consultation. So you can reach out to him directly, bill@axiesgroup.com. Information's on the screen. And of course, Michael and I would love to talk to you more about anything else. If you're looking at having us come and lead a session like this, in terms of not like this necessarily, but to come and give a speech to your organization, do a lunch and learn, to talk to more of your organizational leaders, to help provide them with insights on this journey and this path, to help you achieve the level of transformation that you know is possible, that is just out of your reach, and that requires, as we discussed somewhat today, an outside independent objective observer to help reflect back to you what the reality of the situation may really be, and to provide you with different perspectives to think differently, to act differently. So thank you very much, Bill Leier. Thank you very much, Michael Moon, for being vulnerable and willing to expose and share all this personal journey with us for the benefit of others and hopefully for yourself. And thank you everyone else for joining us today. This is Chris Hewer for our Waymaker webinar series. We look forward to seeing you again at our next one.